On the call today with us is, and I'm gonna ask Helen, even though I didn't tell her I was gonna do this. Dr. Helen Yeardley is a member of the board of directors of the Center for Family Support. And it was through her that we were able to get Dr. Buck to join us today to answer questions for staff. So I think, Helen, if you want to do just a brief introduction of Dr. Buck, and then Dr. Buck can introduce herself. But before we get there, I just want to say most of you, I've muted all of you. Well, now Linda's the host, so she'll have to do that. If you have a question, you could put it in the chat. If you want to unmute yourself, that's okay, but understand we have a lot of people on the call. I did send Dr. Buck a list of the questions I had received in advance from some of you, but I know that things may arise as a result of this discussion today. So I'm going to stop and turn it over to you, Helen.
Hey everybody, thanks for making the time to listen to, I guess not myself, but Kristen Buck. We both work for a contract research organization. This is an organization that executes drug trials on behalf of pharma companies. We've done a lot of the vaccine work. Kristen particularly is a medic. I really think she should introduce herself while she's getting her sound back, though. She has been the chief medical officer for our company for the past 18 months throughout the pandemic. Not only does she have a background, though, in medicine, treating people, but she also has a background in working for the FDA and other pharma companies. And she is well equipped to answer any medical questions that you have on the safety, efficacy, and any other effects of the vaccines.
Hi, can you hear me, everyone?
Yep.
Okay, I have, for some reason, some sort of technical issue where you can't see me, but I am absolutely delighted to join you all today. I know Helen speaks extremely highly of this group and was enthusiastic to have me speak with you all. I will do my best to provide you the best answers I can, but please know I am not speaking on behalf of ICON today. I'm speaking on behalf of whatever knowledge and wisdom that I have acquired, I guess, throughout my life. So I'm really pleased. I love your mission. I think it's fantastic. And I'm honored and humbled to be a part of this group today. I guess maybe my background, I didn't realize I should tell you that. Sorry about that, Helen. A little slow on the uptake. I haven't eaten lunch yet. Guys, I'm an internal medicine physician by training. My true love is caring for people, friends, family, coworkers, patients. I was an internal medicine physician in private practice. I had a driving force. My father's a pharmacist, and I had a love for developing drugs. I went to the FDA. I was an FDA medical officer for 3 years. From there, I went to AstraZeneca, a global drug development company. I was considered the youngest drug development global safety officer because I think I put patients' lives first. So for a major branded drug, I was a safety officer and know the ins and outs of keeping folks safe when a new drug is on the market. I then did clinical development for 7 years, including a newly put on the market drug called Brilinta. Ended up going to a global medical device company to learn the safety and efficacy of how they get approved. And then I went on to Quintiles, a company such as the one that Helen and I are in, and tried to understand drug development from small companies and large companies to see if we could help them get things approved, because I'm ultimately about the patient and health. Ultimately, then I went on to an electronic medical record company, and now I'm here. As Helen will attest, I tell things like it is, like they are. I am someone who treats everyone like they are my family. I am someone who does not necessarily like to take drugs. I'm very judicious about prescribing them. I'm a hawk about my family, about their safety, about what goes in their mouths. I lead by example, be that by exercise or by food. And I try to live by and lead by example. So that's just a little bit of my background, and I hope I can help whatever questions or answer any questions you have today. If I can't, I can always get back to you, but I will tell you what I know and don't know honestly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Buck. I don't know if you want me to, for the group, lay out some of the questions that I had sent you previously. I know that several months ago, Helen did a similar kind of Zoom call for us. And she, this was her first question, but I don't know if there are probably some different people on the call. And there are things Helen said about how drugs are developed, vaccines are developed, and about the safety protocols that have stuck with me to this day. But I think one of the, an overriding question is it safe? It seemed to come out of nowhere. I hear that vaccines normally take 10 years to develop. This got developed in a year. Why should I have any comfort level that this is a safe product?
Yeah, thanks. And please call me Kristen, guys. I don't have an ego in the game here. I would say this is a very astute question. So whoever's asking this, you can bet your bottom dollar that I asked the same question. And even to the day that I got vaccinated. I'll tell you, I am someone who digs for data, and Helen comes to me for data quite often. But I'll tell you what happened here. As you guys have probably read, the first vaccines that came out are what they call messenger RNA vaccines. And the research underpinning these vaccines isn't new. It's not new at all. In fact, it's decades in the making. The technology has been used in humans for multiple drugs, including another coronavirus called, you guys may remember, it's called MERS, M-E-R-S, and another one called SARS, not SARS-CoV-2, but the original SARS. So the technique of using messenger RNA is not new. And what basically happened is, whether it's under control or not, the world was in a pandemic. And what happened was, I think the technical expertise of the decade worth of data, I would say the urgency with the pandemic and a pouring out of financial resources, which I can attest doesn't happen in pharma, enabled us to pull off the fact that we were able to recruit patients up to 30,000 and up to 45,000 in the Pfizer and the Moderna trials, respectively. I think my other question is, look, okay, that's great. You had a perfect storm. You pulled things together, but was the regulatory rigor appropriate? Meaning, did the FDA get pushed, pulled, or what have you? And I'll say, knowing the companies we deal with, they got sidelined, and the COVID vaccines got regulatory precedence. They were brought in on a rolling review. So typically when we make a drug, we have to work through it. We submit it to the FDA, and someone like myself, when I was there, would get 10 months to review it. The way they expedited this process was they submitted some data throughout. So they would give pieces of the compiled data to the regulatory agencies around the world as it came in. So instead of someone like me sitting behind the desk and looking at 30,000 patients worth of data, they were able to look at it in piecemeal. And so when we finally came to the final tranche of data, they were able to make an assessment. I just want to make and emphasize, because trust me, I had a healthy dose of skepticism before I put it in my arm or my parents' arms. Scientists didn't, take any risky shortcuts here. It would never be allowed. I mean, think about it. Over 177 million folks in the U.S. have had this vaccine. If there was a risk to it, someone would be, we would all have a major problem. And the fact that most drugs don't get this many patients in the clinical trials shows the degree to which the drug has been evaluated. Typically, and I don't want to go on, but typically you need 100 patients for 6 months or 300 for a year to get approved. These people had 45,000 or 30,000 patients to demonstrate the drug or the vaccine was safe. So I've looked at it both with my regulatory hat, my daughter hat, and my physician hat, and I can say, I am feeling much better and feeling confident that this is a safe process. It has been a safe process. I can tell you what's going to bite us in the rear end is that the world is going to expect us to develop drugs like this all the time, and it won't happen.
Well, I know when I get very anxious when I hear people say, well, we'll be better prepared for the next pandemic. So I'm kind of hoping we won't get there. Another question that's come up from some folks And in some instances, they've indicated to us that that's even the opinion of their medical, their doctor or somebody they know who's in the medical field, is that they may have had COVID, since a number of people have had COVID, might have had a mild case, or even in some instances, something more severe. And the question they're asking is, since I've already had COVID, why do I even need a vaccine?
Sure. You guys are asking all the right questions. And you can imagine I was responsible for 16,000 people in my company to make sure they're safe. So I've gotten this question many times. You know, our body learns when it sees a foreign object, it learns to make a memory of what it's seeing, and it creates antibodies to it. Depending on what it sees and the inoculation, the amount of what it sees, it creates a robust or not so robust response. So the problem with not getting vaccinated after you've had COVID is you don't know how robust your immune response is. And we have looked at data for folks who have had what we call natural COVID infection, and their immunity, their memory of being infected and ability to defend themselves again is not nearly as long as that of a vaccination. So your body's natural buildup of antibodies and ability to attack COVID again isn't well established or well rooted. They've studied folks with natural COVID infection, and they've given them vaccinations, and they are very well protected as well as they would be with vaccination. So I think there's a few things. It's, you know, you have to think about protecting yourself from death or dying, which these vaccines do, or risking, you know, your immune system just not being robust enough or long enough. We know these vaccines hold your immunity for quite some time, whereas natural immunity doesn't.
That brings up another question that's come up, because I know there's been actually because I follow the news closely when it comes to vaccines. I know that there are some new studies out indicating that the vaccine the immunity that you get from vaccines may be more lasting. I know in the beginning everyone was cautious, saying we don't know, it'll have to be evaluated, we're not sure if people will need booster shots. But I have recently heard that there's some studies which would seem to indicate that we might get more long-lasting protection. Do you have any information about that? Is your sense that we may need booster shots? Is it unclear right now?
So I told you when I not know. This is something that really no one knows. It's a secret thing, but I would bet that we will eventually. And I'll tell you how we're going to determine it. It's really by two factors. The duration of immunity we get from the vaccine, okay, and how this virus continues to change or mutate, creating different variants, which may or may not be well covered by the vaccine. And the problem is, we won't really know those two factors until we start seeing folks getting sick and hospitalized. Some folks in the news have hypothesized we'll need a booster 8 to 12 months from now. Some have even said greater than 12 months. Some have said 1 to 2 years. But if you think about, let's say, a tetanus shot, you need a booster every 10 years. I'd be willing to bet, and I'm not a betting person, as Helen knows, we probably will need it somewhere between 12 months and 18 months. And I think it's because we want to make sure that as the virus mutates, which isn't necessarily a good or bad thing, that the vaccines cover it. I know drug companies are working on mutant-specific boosters, but we don't know. And if anyone tells you they do, they're full of hogwash.
If I can just add there, Barbara, before you move on, in terms of the booster, so it's about a year ago now that the first patients were vaccinated with either the Moderna or the Pfizer shot, and it's getting up to the time where we ask, do you need a booster? So can't speak for Moderna, but Pfizer and the work that we're doing, we're starting to redose patients. So we've got 10,000 patients lined up over the next 2 months that are coming in for an annual booster shots. And hopefully that will help answer the question that, at least partially answer the question that you're asking and Kristen is alluding to. We don't know yet.
Okay. But you raised the issue of variants And again, I listen to Dr. Fauci whenever I can, and he has, he's rung the bell about the Delta variant, and how concerned he is about what that means, particularly amongst people who are unvaccinated. So I sent you a question pretty late this morning, which is, do we know how prevalent the Delta variant is in this area? And does that add to the concern?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying, as I talked about variants, this is expected. This is nothing that we haven't expected. Viral mutations are random. So every time it replicates, it has a chance of randomly mutating, which is not intrinsically good or bad. It's just how nature works. Like, viral mutations can become less effective. They can be more effective. But if you think about what a virus wants to do, it wants to live. So typically they're not necessarily more fatal. They are more infective. The Delta variant is highly transmissible and more transmissible than what we've seen. But interestingly, it's becoming more fatal. I think because of the folks haven't been exposed to other viruses or haven't had their vaccination. Now, having said that, 2 weeks ago, it was less than 5% of the U.S. Last week, it was 10% of the U.S. This week, it's between 20 and 25%. So as you see, it's doubling. In the New York tri-state area, I've seen anywhere between 5 and 10% of the cases that are being recorded are of the Delta variant. But of course, because it is known to be more transmissible, we want to make sure that people get vaccinated.
Okay. I just want to remind everyone, I don't know if it's because you're the host, Linda, if anybody is sending questions in the chat. I'm just kind of going through the questions that I've had previously. I've asked Helen this question, and I know there's and actually this morning I was listening to our Surgeon General, who was asked the same question I'm going to ask you. We have a number of staff who've expressed reluctance and hesitancy about getting the vaccine because it is their hope to have more children. And they have some concerns about, I guess, related to both fertility, because I think a corollary of that is, will it affect my DNA? But, will it affect my fertility, or if I become pregnant, my child?
Yeah, I have received this question personally 1,000 times. And in fact, my niece is recently pregnant. I should say not recently, 20 weeks pregnant, and asked me the same question about 15 times. Getting the COVID vaccine, none of them on the market today will affect your fertility. And I would say women actively trying to conceive, I should say, should get vaccinated. Here's why, and why there's confusion. It's misinformation. I hate this word, but I will explain why. If once you hear the data behind it, you'll understand why there was confusion. It started because there was a false report. I think it was on social media. I don't know. I'm not on social media, saying that the spike protein on the coronavirus, if you see those pictures, the spike protein is the same as another protein called syncytin-1, which is a common protein on placentas. Now, while they share some of their familiarities, they are not the same protein. And so syncytin-1 is on the placenta, and it's involved in the growth and attachment of the placenta during pregnancy. So this is why people started saying, we're making a spike protein with messenger RNA, and we're going to create antibodies to a spike protein, and then we're going to create antibodies to placenta. So first and foremost, let's think about this. If you have a placenta in your body, you are fertile, you are pregnant. It will not affect fertility. The syncytin-1 and the spike protein are not the same. Antibodies for this virus are like lock and key. So it doesn't work on the placenta. Before I get into how the vaccine works, I will say that the ability to fight off the virus can be the antibodies the mother makes can be passed on to a child, which allows the baby to be somewhat protected. But this vaccine works and does not even harm infants who are made via in vitro fertilization. I will say this, during our study, and this is public information, so I'm not sharing anything, 23 women inadvertently became pregnant, only one of whom suffered a pregnancy loss, and she was not on the vaccine. So the data that started this, the science that started this, was false in its assumption to believe that we're somehow cross-attacking a placenta, which would make you infertile. The other data that started this to say it harms my unborn infant. Well, if anything, it protects your unborn infant, just like other vaccines do. And then to the comment about, does it alter my DNA? I just want to give you just a silly version that I've shared with my family of how this vaccine works, the messenger RNA. Messenger RNA is basically the instruction booklet that teaches the virus how to make a spike protein. So if you think of the spike protein as IKEA furniture, the messenger RNA is the instruction booklet on how to make it. This is a technology where we've given the instruction booklet from the virus to us, not the virus, nothing about that it's alive. The instruction booklet is given to our cells, and the cells read the instruction booklet and make the IKEA furniture, and it starts pumping out spike proteins, which our Pac-Man cells recognize and say, ooh, that's foreign. Now I know that when I see that spike protein again, I will attack it. So all this is an instruction booklet for the IKEA furniture, which ultimately makes a spike protein. It doesn't change your DNA. Your cells never get DNA. Messenger RNA is very different. It's an instruction booklet on how to make proteins and enzymes. It's not how your cell works or changes. Just so you know, I suck at putting IKEA furniture together.
I was just thinking that. That would be, oh no, I thought, oh God, IKEA furniture. That would take me.
Yes.
I agree. Too many parts. One of the questions that we've had is, we know that at this point, the vaccines have emergency use authorization. And a question has come up about when, now I know that you might only be able to give us Pfizer, but in general, when is there a prediction about when, and I presume even if, these vaccines will get, I'm not sure what it would be called, but I guess official permanent approval?
Yeah. So emergency use authorization is often used when there's a serious or fatal illness that, for which there are no drugs approved, and the agency feels meets the safety and efficacy bar. I can tell you that currently we don't know when it will be approved, but Pfizer began submitting their data for full approval on May 7th, and Moderna began submitting it on June 1st. And as I told you earlier, it was a rolling review, meaning the sponsors had been submitting data all along the pathway to the FDA. The agency has a large amount of data to sort through and put into a document that I used to write, which basically simply just takes time. Folks have opined that the FDA should have no problem approving this, because we've had more than 177 million doses of Pfizer given in the US and more than 130 million Moderna doses, with a superb efficacy and safety record. I can tell you that the drugs that you see on the market, be that on the commercials, Humira or others, don't have 1/10 of that amount of data to suggest that they are safe. So that's really far more real world data than FDA would ever see. And I think if I were to opine based on my experience when it would be approved, probably earliest September, October.
Okay, great.
And when we got that question, Barbara, we actually, the project teams, I asked them to go back to Pfizer, because Pfizer deal with the FDA on a daily basis, and nobody at Pfizer could give a definitive answer when the actual BLA would be approved. Very, very annoying. I think it should go a lot faster. But.
Okay. One of the questions that has come in from people on the call is, do we have the statistics for people who've been vaccinated and have had, I presume, what's been called breakthrough infections?
I don't have those stats offhand. I can get them. I can tell you anecdotally, it's happening. It's happening in our own company. In fact, I just had that exact situation occur. Again, those who are more vulnerable, those who are older than 65, probably don't create the most robust immune response. Those who could have had it earlier, the vaccine earlier. And remember that these are not 100% effective. They are 100% effective against serious or fatal COVID, but they still are not 100% effective from contracting the virus and getting mild to moderate illness. So I can get back to you if you'd like to know what the actual data are, but I'm not at knowledge right now what they are.
Okay, yeah, I'd appreciate it. We've been, as Helen knows, we've been putting out a newsletter every week, as information changes. And since that question came up, I'd be, I'll include it in a future newsletter. Another question I know I had given to you in advance is any updates on when vaccines would be available for children under the age of 12?
Yeah, again, I think that's probably, they could be available probably by September, October, because clinical trials are currently testing younger children. I know Pfizer, they're looking at clinical trials in kids. So just so you guys know, FDA breaks children up in different age groups. So they're going to start with, 6 months to 11 years. They're breaking up 6 months to 2 years, 2 years to 5 years, and 5 years to 12 years. And I know Moderna is doing something similar. They're doing 6 months to 11 years, and J&J and Novavax are also looking at 12 years to 17 years. So I think unless and until we get all of our kids vaccinated, I don't know if we'll be able to achieve herd immunity, which underscores the need to vaccinate everybody. Because it's going to be like a game of whack-a-mole. If we don't vaccinate people, we're going to see COVID clusters and potential variant mutations. And that's why I keep saying to everyone, get vaccinated, then we'll be playing this game for a long time.
You probably answered what I was going to save as my final question, but we did get another question coming in that is pretty specific. It's actually, they're both related to being related to antibodies that are in the blood. So I'm going to give you both questions. And then so apparently somebody, had B cells due to medication and was vaccinated, but when they got tested for antibodies, no antibodies were present. And the question is that good or bad? I don't want to presume. I think I sort of know where that answer would head. And the other one is, if I've had COVID and I do have antibodies, I think you answered that. But again, why get the vaccine if I have antibodies? Because I had COVID. So I know that's sort of a rerun of a previous question, but I want to be sure to get it out.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer the first one. I'm not sure I understand it. But the second one is, yes, you may have antibodies now, but for how long and to what rigor has your body made antibodies? The fact that the vaccine has been rigorously studied and has determined a degree of antibody in your body that is robust, meaning it has created a level of antibody responsive to the vaccine if challenged again, versus that of natural immunity, which may or may not be robust and may or may not be long lasting. To me, flatly, you need to be protected from getting gravely ill and dying. And with vaccine, you're 100% protected from serious COVID illness and death. So the way I look at it is, look, we're in the United States, less than 50% of the population is fully vaccinated. You don't necessarily know who's carrying it. So to me, why mess around?
Okay, so I think just for the previous question, and I've heard this before, I don't know the science or the medicine around it, that some people who have been vaccinated upon further testing have been shown not to have antibodies. I think that's what at least a couple of the questioners have pointing out, regardless of possibly why. Are you familiar with that? Is there something we should know about that?
So
is
the
it
only thing I
possible
would
to
say,
get vaccinated, not produce antibodies, I guess? And what does that mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's possible. And I think my only concern with that question is, and I'm not refuting it. I'm just basically saying, are we sure that they had an antibody test? The antibody test for COVID wild out there is different than being tested for COVID vaccine spike protein. So we have to be sure that we're talking about the same thing. PCR test is different than antibody test, is different than being tested for live active COVID. So I don't necessarily know that unless the person has, you know, a disease, which I don't want to get into, where they have absolutely no immunity, I don't necessarily know that to be true, unless there was some crazy wild mix-up that they didn't actually get the vaccine.
Okay. I know that we originally scheduled, do we have you for a few minutes more?
My next call is not until in 12 minutes, so I can
Oh,
hang on. If you'd like.
okay, so I will take a look at the questions that are coming in. I know that I've heard this as it relates to children, but the cardiac inflammatory conditions as it relates to vaccines, I know certainly it's one of the potential effects of getting COVID. So have there been cases of cardiac inflammatory conditions that might have a long-term effect from getting the vaccine?
Yeah, and maybe I can give you another sort of anecdote here. To date, as of today, you know, I remember I told you there's 177 million doses of vaccines given. This is myocarditis, inflammation of the muscle of the heart. To date, there have been FDA reported 518 cases, which is lower than what one would expect in the wild population. Now, causal or not, one can't assess, but one would believe that your risk of COVID is much higher than 518 out of 177 million. Having been a global drug safety officer for a company, I can tell you, I fought a lot to make sure drugs were safe, and this would not be on my radar. Having said that, I do want to explain what happens with inflammation and COVID, and I think this analogy has rung true for a lot of people. And forgive me if this sounds hokey, but it's the only way I can describe it. The virus doesn't kill you. Your body kills you when you get COVID, okay? So if you think about your house is on fire, a fire alarm goes off, and a fire company comes to put it out. That's how it works. When your body sees a virus, an alarm system goes off, and your white blood cells, your fighter cells, go in to kill the virus. The sneaky part with COVID is that the fire alarm doesn't stop going off. The fire alarm keeps ringing and ringing and ringing. A second alarm fire, a third alarm fire, a fourth alarm fire. And even though the firefighters had it under control on the first alarm, the firefighters keep coming in to fight the fire that's already out. So you have all of these battalions of firefighters coming in that won't stop coming. And they say, well, where's the fire? And they've got their pickaxes and they're attacking everything and anything they see, just like they would attack your roof if it was on fire. And so what happens is your heart, your muscle of your heart is victim to the fire battalions with their axes, and it gets inflamed just as your lungs do. So if you think about what happens to people with COVID, yes, the virus comes and gets them. They end up getting Fire Battalion 1, Fire Battalion 2, all of these battalions coming in and attacking. And what happens? They have massive inflammation throughout their body because their alarm system doesn't shut off. And so you've heard of the term long COVID haulers, long haulers of COVID. You've seen myocarditis. You've seen the pulmonary fibrosis, lung inflammation. This is all because your body reacted in a certain way. I'm going to just keep talking because I have something else to add here. I'm sorry if I'm boring you, but the reason you see 90-year-olds often survive COVID, and you think, well, how did this frail 90-year-old survive COVID? How did they make it through? And this 25-year-old died. It's because they don't have that many battalions of firefighters anymore. Their immune system is weaker. And so they're not fighting the fire continuously. And so their immune system fought it just enough to kill it. And so when you look at the myocarditis, which is extremely rare in people who have had this, it's not something I would have written about as a global safety person for a drug. But the consequences of COVID are even worse because of the battalions of firefighters that are causing damage to your heart and your lungs. And I hope that makes sense, because that's the only way I can relate it to in non-medical terms.
I have to tell you, it's the first time I've heard that explanation, and it's fantastic. I mean, I will take that along with the insights I had gotten from Helen a couple of months ago as something that I will use when people ask me questions. And again, because I know you're on limited time, it's a question that I'm paraphrasing because this is what concerns me. A lot of, I mean, I think there are some people who we work with who've made a decision. There's nothing we're going to say to them or tell them or information we're going to provide that's going to change their mind. But there's a bunch of other people who are saying, no, I'm not opposed to it. I just want to wait and see. And that, I know, I see your face, Helen. I do the same thing, but to those people, those are the people I think we're trying to talk to now. And saying, if you're waiting and seeing, my question, and maybe their question, but mine is, what's wrong with that? Why is it not okay? Or what should you be thinking about? What's wrong with a wait and see approach to getting the vaccine?
So as Helen knows, I'm a pretty sensitive person. And I think the first question would be to meet them where they are, to understand their opinions and their feelings and understand why they feel that way. Do they have reticence to potential safety concerns? Because that fear or those fears can be allayed. If they are well learned and understand all of this, I guess I would say, try to, without harming them or without, making them feel like a jerk, I would say, look, you are being altruistic by getting vaccinated. You're contributing to society getting back to normal faster, and you're helping protect others. To me, we're in this together. We're all in this life together, and waiting too long, really, we're all going to be stuck in this COVID situation way too long. Vaccination allows the coronavirus to continue, not getting vaccinated allows the coronavirus to continue to mutate. And you can say you're going to wait, but you may never get to a point where your waiting is over until you're the victim. And so to me, I think it's understanding them first, listening to them, educating them, sharing a little bit of potentially pinging on their altruistic effect, because we're not going to get through this without them. And then saying your wait may never end unless you're going to be gravely ill and die. And I know that's a horrible way to end this, but I think that's how I approach it. Ultimately, it's their decision, but they may affect everyone else in society.
Well, part of what you helped us do today and what we wanted to do today is to ask some of the questions that we've heard from staff. As I said, there are probably people on this call that are, I know there are a number of people on this call that have already been vaccinated, but are trying to talk with their coworkers about why it's important, and they don't necessarily they don't know how to respond to some of the concerns that people have. So I want to thank you. This has been extraordinarily helpful. To the person who asked, are we making it mandatory? Not at this time. If we get that lead from government, we would, but no, it's not at this point. And we also got a question about whether or not it was good practice to continue to wear a mask, even though you're vaccinated. And I know lately I've heard, I did hear the CDC director has not changed that guidance, although there are some people who are asking about that, but I know we only have you for a couple of minutes. So if you want to just weigh in on that.
The WHO has said it's the smart thing to do. And me personally, as I said, I'm risk averse. I try to protect my family and loved ones as best I can. I continue to wear a mask because I think it shows and leads by example. And I think the more folks that we get to wear masks and finally put this thing to bed, the better. So until and unless we get the whack-a-mole variants down, I continue to do it. I think for me, it's just the best thing to do. It's an individual decision until it's mandated, but it takes 2 seconds. It's not too terribly burdensome. And I think my life is valuable, as is others. So that's why I do it.
Okay, I want to thank you so much, Kristen. This has been fantastic. Maybe at another time we can see you.
I wish you
And
could.
And I want to also thank Helen for arranging this and because I think for both the information session that she did for us and again today, it's been very, very helpful. We are going to hopefully edit my face out of the beginning of this and then post it when it's ready for the people who couldn't attend. So again, I want to thank you all.
Barbara,
It's
there are
been
a
terrific.
couple of questions there that we haven't answered. If you just want to send them on to me, then we can get you a written answer and you can disseminate them as well.
Okay. Okay, great. Linda, you have all the chat stuff, or we'll be able to see it in the recording?
Barbara, I've saved it, so I'll send it. I'll put it into
Okay,
a Word
great.
document and save it.
All right, thank you, Joanne.
Hey,
Okay.
great to meet you all, and thank you for listening, and great mission you're all on. So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.